Welcome everyone to this edition of InfoTouch University Online, where we go in depth into the various functions of our point of sale products, Store Manager, and Storekeeper POS. Today's session is concerning label reports, and there are reports both in the inventory module and the customer module for producing labels that have good purpose. There is no difference, by the way, between Store Manager and Storekeeper. We're working with Storekeeper today, and we'll go into the various kinds of label reports that we have in the system. Before I go into the actual reports themselves, bear in mind that there are some reports, 2 in the inventory module and 1 in the customer module, that are associated with printing barcodes, and for which you may or may not have a barcode printer. That is controlled in the setup module under miscellaneous in tab 5 as to whether you have some kind of barcode printer type, most specifically zebras and barcode blasters, as well as the add-on package for Bartender. So we'll be seeing some options here because this is turned on in these reports that you will not see if you don't have a barcode printer and use, Avery labels off a standard Windows printer. You have both options when you have a barcode printer, but if you don't, then you just get the Avery label version. All right, that being said, let's go ahead and get started in the customer module. There are 3 reports here, and these are probably less well known than the inventory reports, so let's get into these ones first, and then we'll go to the inventory module. So under Report Customers, you'll notice that there is right here on the top row something called mailing labels, which is obviously, if we're printing out labels, you're going to slap on an envelope to send out to your customers. Like all of these reports, you're going to be able to do things like order the report by either the customer name, number, telephone, one of the several user-definable fields, there's 3 of them, and birth date. Let's select customer number for now. So our report is going to be sorted by the customer number, and I'm going to keep this simple and just select the first 5 customers in this particular vertical that we are using today. Here it's the usual gift store vertical I use for most of these webinars. Also, all the customer reports allow you to filter by customer categories, which are again user definable. So it will default to all the categories being on, which would mean that we would report on every customer regardless of the categories they're in. But if I wanted to produce one that only went out to senior citizens, I could do something like this. And now only our senior citizens would get this particular mailing, or we'd get the labels for this particular mailing for only senior citizens. But that's good to know, but I'm going to leave them all on. Our next tab for this report, and this should look familiar to folks who are used to the customer sales history report, one of the key ones in the system. This allows us to pick out customers to mail to, potentially either by their sales history or not. You see the default is do not filter by sales history. But if I wanted to potentially do some other things, I'll go into illustration of this in a second or two. We can filter by the buying habits, and this can be either a positive, I want to send things to people who bought this item in the last 3 months because I've got a special deal on it, or I want to send a mailing out with a coupon to any customer who hasn't bought anything from me, in the last 6 months or what have you. You do also have an option here to use the ship to address. The default is to use the bill to address. And if the ship to address is blank, we'll still use the bill to address, but you can specify ship to. Lastly, we get into the kind of labels that we're going to be printing on. This is not a barcode report, so all of the label reports that don't include barcodes on them are in fact going to go out to some Windows printer with Avery compatible labels. So we have a nice list of them here. I'll go ahead and select this one here. We have some options for whether we want to start on a sheet of labels at something besides the first row and column. In case you have a partially used sheet, that can be pretty handy. And we can optionally specify compressed print. So if we're using a smaller label, for example, we may want to go ahead and get the font size down so that we can fit the address comfortably on the labels. But we'll just go ahead and leave this as is and hit finish. And this is just going to the screen. So we get just a straightforward mailing label that would center nicely on the picked Avery label type, or it could also be, of course, a compatible label type. And so we're sending things to Mary Hamilton. You'll notice on the top right, this is actually a firm where the key contact comes out at the top, attention Jeff Lee, the firm Johnson, Lee & Brown. And we have the first 5 customers in our database here, so we can print mailing labels for them. Let's take a look back at the options that I just briefly mentioned. So this right now is saying, I don't care what the customer's bought or not bought from me, but maybe I want to actually tailor this mailing for somebody who bought items, let's say in the last, since July 1st, since the start of the second quarter. We also have a from to item number range option, so we can say not only did they buy something from us, which is basically what this is right now, based on from and to item number being blank, we could put in a specific item number or a range of item numbers, and the report would filter by those who bought those specific items over the specified date range. I'll leave that alone for right now, and we're just now looking for somebody who bought something from us in the second half of 2012. And you notice we had 5 before. We still have the same range of customers, but we filtered out 3 of them based on their buying habits. So, again, I want to reward my customers buying from me. I know they're interested in certain product lines, the kind of things you would use this sort of feature for. There is also the converse of that, which is to say, you know what? Boy, this person hasn't been in and bought anything from me in the last, 4.5 months now. I want to send them a coupon that says, come on in, we miss you. We'll give you a 10% discount on anything in the store, good until, Black Friday or what have you. So this is another thing that's built in, and this also works with from to item numbers. So right now we're saying any customer that we have selected that did not buy from us since July 1st, but we can also filter that down and say, somebody who didn't buy a specific item, for example, since July 1st, come on in the store, here's a 10% coupon for this item. So it's very flexible, and here this version of the report comes up with the other 3 customers that we didn't see on the last round. So these 3 didn't buy, the other 2 did. If we don't filter by sales history, we get all 5. So that's customer mailing labels. There is a offshoot of that called past due mailing labels. And this has to do with receivables. So a customer that is not paying their account balance on a timely fashion, we certainly might want to go ahead and send them a reminder that they owe us and it's past due, and maybe put in some information about the service charges that are being applied, what have you, up to obviously the letter that would be inside the envelope with this mailing label on it. We have the same order filter. We'll leave customers 1 to 5 and all the categories on, but they're there. And in replace of the options tab, we have a balance tab. So when we say past due, that's actually kind of ambiguous and might depend on the retailer's preferences. So you may remember we have a current and 3 additional balance periods. They default to 30, 60, and 90 days, but that is customizable in the setup module. And so by default, you're going to find that we're coming into defining a past due balance as anybody with a balance over 0, if you have any balance at all, And it turns out in this case we're at 45, 90, 135 days, so it's defined for the second period after the current period. So if they have something current, it's obviously not past due, and here we're saying, well, we'll let you slide for, you know, the first balance period too, but now you're 2 balance periods out. We don't like that. There is also an option here about aging balances on the fly. It's probably in general a good idea, because what happens over time as every charge and every payment are initially put into the current period, and you should regularly go through the age customer balances function in the accounts receivable section to properly move those over time from the current period to the first period to the second period to the last period. So right now, if we haven't done that regularly, it may be that we have customers with past due balances, but they might all still be sitting in the current period because I haven't done my housekeeping. Well, you don't have to. You can do it right here by selecting age balances on the fly. Note that the customer record is not updated. It is simply being calculated. You know, okay, this thing is showing up in the current balance period, but in fact is from 3 months ago. It's not current anymore. And we've got the same options on the label tab. And so here we will get, in fact, in this case, just one customer has got a balance in the 90 or over category. If we had switched that to, let's say, the 45-day category, no, we still just have one. But you get the idea that they will, the software will actually produce labels for those folks who are not paying you in a timely manner as you define at the time of the report. The third and final customer label report is barcode labels, and you can guess that that does include barcodes. If you've got a barcode printer, we'll go ahead and give you the option of selecting that printer. So again, the same first two tabs. I won't belabor the point. The use barcode printer is the default if you have a barcode in setup. You still can go to a report printer though, which I will use because you won't be able to see this on a barcode printer. We've got the same label types, options for starting at rows and columns and compressed print. Now, if I run the report just like this, I'm actually not, I haven't checked the with barcode labels, so I just get numbers. But the point of this is you want to give out some kind of ID. You might want to laminate this or what have you, so a customer could put it in his or her wallet. And you almost certainly want to put a barcode on it, and you get a variety of choices, both in terms of whether it's narrow, medium, or wide label, and the size of the actual barcode itself. These barcodes actually ship as a font, so we're really talking about changing the font size here. And I'll select 22, and now you see we get something that you could actually give to a customer and just scan that. In the register module, when you hit the customer account button to link the sale to the customer, you don't even have to touch a button. Simply scan this label and it will automatically select that customer. All right, well, those are our 3 customer module label reports. Now we'll go to the 5 that are in the inventory module. And these are really workhorse reports that I think most of you will be familiar with, particularly things like price labels and received price labels, where we allow you to go ahead and print barcodes with lots and lots of options, barcode labels that you can slap on your inventory and ring up at the register. In fact, there are enough of these reports that they actually have their own separate section on the Windows menu here. So under labels, you'll see 5 different reports. But I'll take you down into, it doesn't matter which way you access this, so we'll go through the list of labels, and here's the first one right here. It's called Location and Notes Labels. And this is not a barcode label report. In fact, only received price labels and price labels print barcodes on the label. The purpose of this, you'll notice it's got a dual name. It was originally just a location label report, and the idea was this would be used for something like a shelf tag. So you could print a label and go ahead and slap that label, on a space, by the items on the shelf, and people would know what items they were and what the price was, that sort of thing. Over time, we also added another option for printing inventory notes on the label. We'll get to both of those options. We start out with the usual reporting selection in inventory, which allows us to run it for all items, which this is doing right now, by the way. So if defaults to item number, from is blank, to is blank means run everything, or we can select a specific department and even drill down from there into, I'm interested in my t-shirts, for example, and I'll just pick one out here and let it fill it in. So, and then if I wanted to maybe adjust that from there, I want all my Bayou Country t-shirts to print, I could simply eliminate the from to size and we'd get all of them in the system. But I'm going to switch back to item number. This is stuff that I'm sure you're all familiar with, UPC, department groups, etc. The options here, first of all, again, two very standard inventory report options to filter the report by a specific vendor. You can either use the drop-down list or use the binocular button to find them by name. But I don't want to do that. I just want to illustrate that. Or by location, in which case you put something like, aisle 5 or whatever you have put in the location field for these records, and only those in that particular location would print. All right, so let's start with location labels. There is an option to include the price on this as well. So you may or may not want to put the price in. If you do, since we're running across potentially hundreds of different items with different setups for units of measure, you have an option of either the stocked retail price that you see in the inventory record, or if you have multiple units, you can print labels with the default selling price. So if I sell my beer, if I buy my beer by the case, and I sell cases, 6-packs and singles, and I designate that the default selling price is 6-pack, then this would print the price for the 6-pack instead of the price for the stocking unit, which is the case. Okay, so if items don't have unit of measure, by the way, this is just ignored, so you don't have to worry about those items that don't have this if you wanted to just print a whole ream of labels for a variety of different types of items. Below that is something called the number field. So recall that each item in our system must have a unique item number. It can have a blank UPC, or if not blank, the UPC must be unique as well. So the question in terms of what number we want to print on the report, and this will tie in a few minutes to the barcodes as well that we produce, is, well, what do we want to put on that label? Do we want to put a number like the UPC number? Do we want to put the item number? Actually, we have three choices for you here. So if the item has a UPC code, this default option here says we'll put the UPC in. If the item does not have a UPC code, we don't have any choice. We're going to put the item number in. There is no other way to find the item by a number. Some people, though, even if they have a UPC code in the system, don't want the UPC code on the labels. They want the item number. A little unusual, but it's come up quite a bit, and it's a standard option for us. Lastly, we have an option here. If you think about what's coming in from your vendors, that is, Coca-Cola's and, Budweiser beers and Wrigley's gum and what have you, those guys all have UPC codes in the system, of course, but they also come with the UPC code already printed on the item itself. So we don't need a label for this item. So the skip if UPC not blank means, okay, we'll only print an item for an item with the item number on it and no UPC. on the assumption that if it has a UPC, we don't really need a label for it. And this mostly applies to the barcode labels, but still is available for these other reports. Lastly, we go to our Labels tab. Again, this is not a barcode report, so we get our Avery choices, row and column, compressed print, and we had selected to include the price, so we're seeing on top here in bold either the UPC or the item number. You can tell the longer ones are UPCs and the shorter ones are item numbers that have no UPC on them. And we get the description of the item and its location. The other flavor of this label report is to go in and select the notes version of it. So in inventory, in the, let's go ahead and look at this for a second. I'll go ahead and take a look. At a specific item in New York Times Daily. And in the Special Features tab, you'll notice there is a checkbox for notes. This item is set up to have it. And if you hit Show Detail, you can have up to 3 40-character lines. And the idea behind using this on labels is that we may want to go ahead and wrap something around, like, for example, a sizable shrub in a garden center, and have the growing instructions, which are, would in this case be entered in as notes, into the actual label that we produce. So that's cool because, you know, the person takes it home and forgets what's supposed to do with that product. Well, they just have to look at that label. And it's a generally available feature for every vertical, for every item, that you can put in 3 40-character notes. These notes can also, by the way, print on the receipt. If you specify that in Invoice Formatter, the notes can print right below the description of the item on the receipt. So let's go back and run our notes version here. We won't worry about the rest of it. And remember, we looked at that New York Times Daily. For the items that have no notes, well, there's nothing to print, but we can go ahead and print those notes right on the label. And again, I think the most common example is the garden center, or perhaps in some kinds of markets where they want to put some more information about the product than you can really fit into the description. I'm going to come back to the Receive Price and Price Labels one and skip on to the serialized label. So this is going to print labels for items that are serialized. You've got a few extra options here. This is not used frequently, but we put it in some time ago where, in addition to the regular retail price, you could put in an extra price label on the same label. So you might want to highlight the fact that, you know, hey, this is $3 for, you know, off the street customers, but if you're part of our frequent buyer program, you get it for $2.50, and you can put that right on the label. You also do have an option of using the short description of the item if it's there instead of the regular description. We'll just go ahead and finish out, and you'll notice we went straight to item 1011, a souvenir, and it turns out this is the only serialized item in this set of data here. So what we're getting is the item number, or UPC, and that's the serial number, and that is the description, and that's the price. So you can slap that on a specific serialized piece of inventory. There is no barcode label version of this today, by the way. What there are barcode label versions are the price labels and the Receive Price Labels report. Let's start with price labels. It's sort of more the generalized version of this. So again, we've got, you know, the usual way to pick your items. We've got a bunch of other things in here all of a sudden, though. So let's take a look at what's here. So normally, we're going to pick some items. I'm going to go and just leave all this stuff at the default, except for one thing. The default is to print a label for each unit. So if I have 50 of a specific item in stock, it's going to print 50 labels. For purposes of our viewing this, I'll use the other option here, which allows you to specifically print a given number that you get to enter. It defaults to 1. It could be 2 or 10 or whatever you feel like, but this is usually just a way to get a label out for the item selected. We have the extra price level thing, which again is not used a lot, in the short description checkbox. And we have something called price format. So let's go through these one at a time. I'll illustrate them, and we'll see if we can get the gist of what they're supposed to be about this way. Then finally, on the Labels tab, again, this is a barcode report now, which I will do on my screen so we can see it. And we'll, again, select a medium 22 font thing. So now we get a label that starts with the barcode, either of the long UPC comparatively or the short item number. Of course, item numbers can actually be longer than UPC, but in this particular case, they are not. So we get the barcode, we get the human readable version. So if the label's kind of messed up a bit, somebody might still be able to look at the text here and figure out what number to type in manually, the description, and the price. Okay, let's do that again. This time we'll pick the large price format label, which, as you may guess, has to do with the fact that the price is big, large, and bold, and takes up enough space that we no longer can fit the big barcodes on the one label. We can't force, because you've told us what size font to use, that particular UPC code to fit in the space that this label has allocated for the item. So let's go back and change some things here. Run that same version again. So we're going to still stick with a large price label, but now we'll go back and use a narrow 14-point font, which will not take up nearly so much room. And we're also going to use, and by the way, I forgot to switch this to the, this is just usually easier to fit things in. Oh, I see. No, never mind. Actually, the large price label only fits on this specific first label type. All the other reports allow you to specify different labels type except this one, which is why as I'm coming down this list and clicking on it, nothing's happening. And I'm going to use compress print because I want to make sure this thing fits in the space allocated. And now you can see, we can see the description. We have a much smaller barcode, but the barcode printers have no problem reading this kind of thing. We have the human readable version, and we have a big price. And a lot of people like this format because there is the big price that is very easy to see for the customers. All right, next one, none. Okay, so somebody came along to us at one point in time and said, I've got items with a 0 price in the retail price field. And in the register, that is typically meant to prompt the clerk to put in a variable price. So, I'm charging you $5, I'm charging the next person $7. It's up to, it's a way really to have a kind of an open item is generally what it's used for. So I'm going to decide that at the time it's sold. So why do I want to go ahead and print a price label with a price of 0 on it? Because the customers might look at that and say, well, heck, that's free. I'll take it. So the none option here simply excludes items with 0 price from being printed, regardless of any other considerations. It does use besides that, the standard format, which should allow me to pick out additional label types. And it may not be obvious, but what's going to happen here is we just lost some items that have a 0 price. Well, once we did that, we had some people say, well, I understand the reason why we're skipping over it, but we want to not skip over it. And don't ask me why, because it does make a lot of sense to me, but we had customers who have been using this for a long time and actually wanted the 0 price to show up. So the none includes 0. does that for you. So it's not showing the price, but it is also printing a label for items with a zero price, even though you might think that that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We also have some special features here that you won't find elsewhere. So if I'm in a retail store and I've got a bunch of items on the shelf and I've already printed labels for them and I received them last week, and this week I decide to put a bunch of them on sale as I'm changing the price, then I'd like to be able to print a batch of labels just for the items whose price changed over a specific date and time range. And that's what this does for you. I'm not going to bother to illustrate it. It just will always, it will only work for those items whose price was changed during the time frame you specify. And that's a very handy feature for a store. The other thing that you can do with this that can be potentially very useful is if you have the handheld inventory option, you can walk around the store with your handheld unit, scan the items that you want to print labels for, and then we will prompt you for the file that you've dumped to the system from that handheld with the item numbers that you want labels for, and we'll just print price labels for those items. So it allows you to pick and choose using your standard handheld inventory device that you use for physicals and receiving, and use that to select items to print barcodes. So that basically covers the various flavors of the price label report. There's a refinement that is very important enough that it's got its own separate report of price labels called Receive Price Labels. And as you might imagine, what this is about is telling me, based on the date range you enter, I just want to print price labels for the items that I received into stock. Beyond that, all the options are the same. One other exception, you can actually set a PO filter on this. So if you receive directly, this would not work, that is using adjust inventory. But if you go to the replenishment module, you make a PO, it comes in, you receive it, and it's PO number 50, then this thing will say, okay, I'm just printing labels for items that came in through that PO 50. If you don't do that, the date range will pick up items received either via PO or through adjust inventory. So beyond that, the reports are the same. It's just that it's such an important thing to print labels for items as they are received that we have some special features for just that purpose. They're very close in terms of similarity, both very, very useful reports, and ones that, of course, do support printing to barcode printers as well as to Windows printers. And with that, we have covered all the barcode labels within our software, at least as of this time. I thank you very much for attending, and I hope you're around for the next InfoTouch University Online.